It is 1:30, and I am thrilled to share with all of you today. We have a masterclass for today's episode. So this is an opportunity where Julia and or I come on to, as I like to say, unzip our brain and kind of like, jog all this information out and into you. So today we are going to pour into you about Nonprofit Emeritus Boards. Julia Patrick is really going to lead today's discussion. I will add whenever I think, I have something to add, but I'm looking forward to learning. I'm so grateful to each and every one of our presenting sponsors. Of course, you see their logos right in front of you on the screen, just as you do each and every episode, as well as right behind Julia and I on every episode. We are just thrilled to have their continued partnership as we continue on into 300, close to 350 episodes now. So grateful to have their investment, not only in our episodes, but truly in our community, your community at large. So thank you to our presenting sponsors. And thank you to Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I'm Jarrett Ransom. I get to have fun each and every day, except for when I'm not here, to play this fun co-hosting role. I'm Jarrett Ransom, the nonprofit nerd CEO of the Raven Group. So sad I missed yesterday. I had some power outages in my studio, which really just, put a damper on me being on. So I know yesterday went well. I'm looking forward to today. Again, today is this masterclass, really talking about emeritus boards. This is a topic that I go to you, Julia Sensei, to learn more about this topic. So share with us and again, unzip that brain and let it all come out, because I am looking forward to learning, as I'm sure many of you watching live as well as the recording, what is the power of emeritus boards? How do they work? How do you get them started? How do you keep them engaged? So Julia, thank you.
Hey, thank you. It's really an interesting topic. We visit this from time to time. We've spoken about this over the past year and a half. We've had questions about it for our Friday Ask and Answered. We're seeing those questions come up more frequently now that people are looking to get back into restructuring their boards or re-engaging their boards. So many nonprofits, 1.8 million nonprofits in this great nation of ours, they put kind of like a freeze on board movement. Didn't mean that their boards didn't engage. It's that they stopped bringing in new people or letting people go off, because it was such a perilous thing to figure out how are we going to navigate a challenging time for our nonprofit and bring in new people or move off old people. So now I see a lot of boards that are ramping up, and I'm sure you're seeing this too. Just the number of inquiries that I'm getting to say, would I like to be on somebody's board, which comes in frequently. It's really, really been amplified. And so
I have been seeing this, to answer that question. And in fact, as I look at the evolution of the organization in which I am hearing most of this come from when it comes to the topic of Emeritus Board, it's really looking at that evolution of, they're about 15, 20, 25 years young as an organization, and they are evolving those really champion ambassadors. Because as I'm sure you're going to share, the Emeritus Board is not where they all go, right? It is not the succession plan of every board member.
No, it's not. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it really does have some gravitas. It's not a given. So let's start with, actually, because I'm a word geek. Emeritus comes from the Latin word veteran soldier. Sometimes you'll see it as old soldier. And so it really is a word that connotes wisdom and age and time served, and maybe a person who doesn't have the full-on capacity that they had in their youth. Doesn't mean that their mind is not as capable. It just might mean that they don't have that vitality that they once had to serve full on with a board. So this is a really interesting way to frame it, because a lot of times emeritus boards, we think, oh my gosh, they're like super old people. And that can be the case, but a lot of times it's just people that have moved on to other things. And so my whole deal is don't lose that institutional knowledge. Don't let it go, because it is so incredibly value oriented for making decisions that could really change the trajectory of your organization. So one of those things when we talk about board champions, the Emeritus Board is an actual board, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but they are another, if you will, subset of the main board, the fiduciary board, the board of directors. So they have an actual management situation that allows them to still be a cohort, right? Sometimes emeritus boards are tasked with leading certain things. They might be, mentors. They might kick off a big fundraising period of time. They might work on an archive project. They might work on an anniversary project, right? So, I mean, it does have a piece of it that's pretty important. I think one of the things that's really interesting about the Emeritus Board, Jarrett, is that they are actually voted on by the board, right?
And by their peers, absolutely.
Yeah, and like you said, it's not a given that everybody just shuffles off to the Emeritus Board. Not a given. So it needs to be something that is recognized as not only an honorific, but an actual piece of business, if you will, right?
Now, I have a question. So when we talk about board service in general, we often talk about the expectations of those members. What are the typical, if that's even the right word, expectation of an emeritus board member? So what does that look like?
Really good question. That is going to differ depending upon what your organization sets up. So for example, I've worked with groups where they maintain an amount of money that each emeritus board member is going to pay, in the form of dues, board dues, and they call it that, or an annual gift to the organization. Okay, it can be a little, it can be a lot, right? Because you have to remember, it can be very prestigious for some people to be on an emeritus board of a high profile organization, right? Absolutely. So there's value going both ways. Oftentimes, and we'll get into this a little bit more, there are going to be certain things that are required. So for example, attending one event a year, attending one meeting a year. It might be to provide mentoring. It might be to provide, as we open up, tours. You're going to bring so many people to our campus, right? And we're going to engage in that. So it really is a function of how you want to get that board to work for you, right? You need to be strategic.
So with that, we have a live question that came in. Okay. So I'm going to curveball, get ready to bunt or knock it out of the park, whatever. Although I know it's basketball right now, but we're still
don't even go there. Last night was bad.
We're going to stick to baseball. Yes. Yeah. So the question that came in is, how would you handle a board member who rolls off the board thinking they are going to get knighted, I love that word, with emeritus status and do not get emeritus status? So essentially, how do you handle a board member that assumes that they will be, really tapped on the shoulder, voted into emeritus, and they're not?
That is a great question. And, I don't think I've ever been asked that question in that way, and I love it. I think this goes back to one of my main principles that I always address when we're talking about boards. It's all about expectations and understanding the process. Mm-hmm. And so this is one of those things that you need to be talking about as you go forward. Your existing board members need to know that there is this wonderful opportunity called the Emeritus Board, and not everybody gets to go on it. It's privileged. I'm going to say that word. it's functional. You have to still do some things. You're not just going to have your name, on the website. And it's something that is studied, meaning the rest of the board needs to look at that and determine if that's going to be a good fit. Oftentimes, this would be administrated through the nominations committee. So for those of you who have that nominations committee, sometimes they'll call it board HR, board development, that kind of piece. That's that committee. So you would go through an actual nomination process. Good question. I hope that helps, because it's not an easy thing. I also want to talk really quickly about the piece that dovetails into what we were talking about a little earlier, and that is, what are those requirements? And you brought that up. There's no fiduciary role, meaning these board members are not the first line of defense on any legal issues, contracting, grants. They probably aren't even listed on the 990s, the IRS 990s. They could be. More importantly, they are going to be in a specific PR usage, if you will. They're going to be prestigious people that you might include when you are applying for a grant, to say you have these, community elders or these community supporters, standing at the ready. Oftentimes there is no term that this will be voted on forever, right? Or the terms might be long, 8 years, 10 years, something like that. A lot of times we will see founders, founding board members, really tremendous people of import or impact become lifetime emeritus board members. That means for the duration of their life, they're identified, and you obviously, with their permission, then they are with that group, right? So to give you an idea, a lot of times we would see this with maybe governors, state governors, US senators, sometimes even really large funders, maybe somebody who's endowed something to a campus, that kind of a thing.
What about founding board members or founders of the organization? Is this a great place to really, I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to, house these individuals in perpetuity? I'm thinking that would be kind of an infinite emeritus opportunity to really have that institutional knowledge, but also to acknowledge and just, recognize them as founding members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the, the airline stewardess that stands at the end of the cabin and says, bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. I mean, this is one of those things. We talk a lot about this founder syndrome on the Nonprofit Show. And
Yes.
This is one of those places where, we see this a lot in the nonprofit sector, where an organization is started with a parameter, and then the community changes, thought leadership changes, maybe the problems change, and yet you still have that cadre that is very passionate, that's very dedicated, that was the founding piece, but they're aging, right? And maybe they're not as able to give their full force of effort, faith, and intellect to the organization. The Emeritus Board is a graceful way to move people off without losing them as champions. And that might sound a little harsh, but I think you never want to have like a messy situation where you extricate yourself from those founding members in a negative way. And you've seen that, Jarrett.
I have seen that. And now I'm questioning, is there a certain sweet spot or number of emeritus board members?
That's a really good question. And we always say 15 to 25 is where a lot of board numbers live. And that's one of the beautiful things of the Emeritus Board, is that you can keep going up. Now, the reality, unless you're a massive, massive institution with a long life, you might not, have ever get to those numbers. Now, I have actually seen recently, and it was kind of an interesting situation, I saw, and I haven't seen this too much, but I saw something that was called the Eternal Board. And that was for deceased board members. You know,
I have never seen that.
yeah, it was a little shocking. And this was not like a faith-based or, anything like that. It was an organization that recognized the august, import of their board members and those that had passed on. And I suspect, I do not know, but I suspect it was a board that must have faced probably a sudden loss of a number of people, right? I'm not saying something like calamitous, but maybe just over a short period of time, they lost some board members, maybe young board members, who knows? And then they wanted to do something that honored them.
Well, realistically, with the global virus that we've had and that pandemic, this could be an opportunity that has arisen with so many health complications for many vulnerable populations. So it's really not that far-fetched, right?
Yeah, really. That's, I didn't think of it that way. I'm pretty sure they started it before the pandemic, but you know what?
I'm sure.
That is, wow, that's an awesome thing to consider, because you are right. I mean, the loss in our country that continues.
It has been significant, yes, and continues. I was just talking with someone, and for those of you that are avid viewers and watchers, I'm sure you know this by now, but I also had COVID in December of last year, but I was just talking to someone else who so graciously brought me chicken noodle soup when I was sick, and he had it as well. And I was like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Is there residuals? So there's a lot of community members, a lot of, our citizens that really are experiencing so many continued complications. I'm very grateful and blessed to really be healthy. But that was just something that came to mind, just really, really natural in today's conversation.
Yeah.
Talk to us about, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to move us into the slide that we see here, which really is about maintaining connectivity. And my big question is, because of COVID, because of going through the pandemic and so many pivots, right? I know we're all tired of hearing that word, but let's be honest, it's still in our vernacular. So as we move into, this pivot stage, a lot of our, the way we've done business has changed. How does that really impact the maintaining connectivity with our Emeritus Board, knowing that these might be, and I'm going to say, literally older individuals that are not as adept to the newer ways of doing business? Talk to me about that and what that might look like.
I love that you asked this question and that you framed it in this way, because one of the things that, and maybe it's just because I just turned 60, but one of the things that this Emeritus Board is masterful at is the human connection.
Yes.
And the connection of people to resources, to thoughts, to actions, to deeds, to history. And so that doesn't go away, right? It just has to be put forth maybe in a different way. So, the Zoom concept still works. Might they need a little, help or instruction on that? Yeah, could be, maybe not. But the reality is, this is the group that you can go to when you need that. Hey, does anybody know, so-and-so from XYZ? This is what you get. This is the power and the magic of the Emeritus Board, because they are working within many, many layers of their own professional history, their professional connections, and their family connections, right? And it is amazing to me. We always say, oh, it's such a small world, but this is the army of leadership that you can access for things you would never imagine. Jarrett, you talk about this a lot, and that is when you're moving forward on a big grant proposal or a community proposal or even an MOU, to go to your board and to say, hey, we're going to be doing this. Do you know anybody? Do you, and you never know where this group says, oh my gosh, they're my golfing buddy, or you just don't know.
Yes. Well, and that's the power of connection, right? And it also takes me back to the word we've been talking so much about is the return on relationship, because these individuals really have sunk their teeth into the community. This is where they have invested their time and additional resources. And so the likelihood of these individuals truly serving as a really well-connected ambassador is really strong. We had another live, I'm going to say, comment that came on during today's episode, as you were just sharing, Julia, about maintaining connectivity. And this individual shares that we only allow past officers to be nominated. So again, not even automatically on, but nominated for emeritus. So they only allow past officers to be nominated. In emeritus role, they are called upon to serve on ad hoc committees, but are always kept in the loop on organization activities. And I think that is a perfect comment, especially in this conversation right now where we are on maintaining that connectivity.
So I like that. And it shows me that this organization is using the structure. They're using this human capital, if you will, to move through the journey of the organization. Bravo to you. I would challenge you to look at non-officers. Because if there are, shining stars that could still be in your portfolio, so to speak, you shouldn't let them go. And when I look at high level boards, a lot of times real power brokers are hesitant to take an officer position because they're on so many other boards. And so you have to kind of look at that. And if you have an organization that's run tightly in the separation of an executive committee versus full board, all that, you need to kind of factor some of those things in. But don't look away from that general population, because it might be somebody that you're letting go of that you really could pull in. But I love that question or comment, because that shows to me that they are working this group. Yay team. I mean, wow, we should have them on as a guest.
Hint, hint, wink, wink. Yeah.
Type back to them. Okay. We don't have much time. One of the questions that you raised, and even this last question is, how are you engaging them? I love having these emeritus board members serve on ad hoc committee as ad hoc committee members, mentoring and all that. But I've seen a lot of success with an annual event, digital or IRL, where there is some sort of component with the existing board and the emeritus board comes together. It might be for coffee. It might be for heavy hors d'oeuvres at somebody's home. It might be yay team on the campus of the organization, because a lot of times we see a trajectory of this certain board started things, but they weren't always there to finish it. I'm thinking of long-term capital campaigns. I'm thinking of construction projects. Yes. I'm thinking of the evolution of an organization's physical space, right?
I'm thinking too, as we look, and this has been a big conversation during the pandemic, Julia, has really been about collaborative initiatives, right? Of how organizations might merge or acquire with one another, and how the emeritus boards, plural, of all or any of these organizations coming together could really unify to strengthen the community in this message. And I think that is a wonderful opportunity to really engage your emeritus boards in, that social event and update. Secondarily, I had a question about how might you engage the emeritus board when it comes to these social events, updates, and whatnot. With the current board, is there a mentorship opportunity that you've seen work successfully?
So a lot of boards, and I'm like a big champion of this concept, is no matter the age or the sophistication of a new board member, they will pair them with a mentor for 1 to 2 years. 1 to 2 years. And I think that is where this can come in. Now you might be like, oh my gosh, Sally Smith, she's been on 25 boards and she knows the process, and that's great, but she might not know the culture. And so
Exactly.
that's where this emeritus board leadership can come into. And it's really strong. It's really powerful. And you know this from mentoring yourself. I think as a mentor, oftentimes you get more out of things than the mentee.
Absolutely. We just started our chitty chat today talking about the Mandela Scholars and how we've both been a part of mentoring the Mandela Scholars at some point in our careers. And I personally have received so much out of that as well. So it's been really nice. Well, Julia, this has been a very phenomenal Emeritus Boards Masterclass. I am so grateful for you opening up and sharing all of that wonderful wisdom that you have collected throughout your community service. Thank you for sharing with us the Nonprofit Emeritus Boards. I want to say there's some other resources in particular on this topic on the American Nonprofit Academy. So please do check that out, AmericanNonprofitAcademy.com. Of course, this live recording will be on our archives. You can find those Roku TV, Fire TV, YouTube, Vimeo, you name it. You just say the words Julia Jarrett Nonprofit Show, and lo and behold, it will show up somewhere in your environment. So
it's kind of true, Jarrett. It's kind of true.
It is true. We are so grateful, of course, to our presenting sponsors as well. Without you, we could not continue these robust conversations. So thank you to our presenting sponsors that you see here. They also come on, make an appearance, and share with us their wisdom and experience of many, many years, decades. So each and every one of our presenting sponsors also has an episode each and every month to help you continue the great work that you are doing here in our community. I did not mean to skip us, but Julia Patrick, of course, has joined us today and shared with us in this masterclass. Julia is the CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy, and that is where you can find many more resources on the Emeritus Board topic, as well as many others. I'm Jarrett Ransom, also known as your nonprofit nerd, the nonprofit nerd, CEO of the Raven Group, and are just really glad to be back and doing this thing with you, Julia. It's just been such a joy. And to all of you who continue to join us, we know that life is starting to open back up and everyone is starting to fill their schedules with many other activities and events. So while you might not be able to join us live, you can always find our recordings, and we have actually seen a huge spike in our archive viewership. So we know that what we are doing is helpful in supporting you in the good work that you are doing each and every day. Thank you.
Yeah, we do. And this, before we go, we don't have but just a few moments here. We're really excited about our new partnership with Fundraising Academy. They're now the exclusive sponsor of Friday Ask and Answered. And so we had our first one with Tony Bell
last Friday.
And I've got to tell you, it was fascinating because he totally researched all the questions. He got the deck before, which you do not. And
say that's a little unfair.
I know. Well, you know what, Jarrett, he's a newbie and I didn't want to spring it on him. I kind of did, but then I was like, no, I can't do that. But holy moly, I'm not saying he was better than you. I'm not saying that at all. But he was better than me on certain things. Because he's a new sponsor, I didn't want to do that old what are you talking about? I disagree. But we did have some different opinions, which was super cool. And one of the things that I figured out, which was so interesting, is that, we're situated in the West and he's situated in the East.
Yes.
And so some of and he's from the East, just like I'm from the West, born and raised. He's born and raised from the East. Some of our approaches were, I thought, very, very cultural.
Which is interesting, and I'm bi-coastal, born and raised in the East, working professionally in the West. So I have a lot of, differing, I want to say those learned behaviors and the cultural behaviors. I've brought that with me certainly into my Western ways.
But you know what? I loved it. I was really intrigued by it because I thought, this is what our viewers are
So important.
experiencing. Yeah, and this is what we need to think about when we are looking at the operations of successful nonprofits, because there is a difference culturally from
Absolutely.
parts of our country. And so it was riveting. But yeah, I want to say join us for Ask and Answered on Fridays. He's not going to be with us every Friday. He'll be on a couple times a month, but it was really fun, Jarrett. And when you do it with him, you'll really like it. It was
I'm excited. Well, tomorrow is Friday, and that is our Ask and Answered. So thank you to Fundraising Academy. Julia and I will be on tomorrow. Hope that you will join us as well. And until then, stay well so you can do well. See you later.